I want to start with enrollment because that seems to be a through current for a lot of the issues that the school district faces. OCPS is expecting to lose over 3,000 students in the 25 to 26 school year. Firstly, I wonder what your assessment is. How do we get here? What's going on?
So there's a couple of factors that have contributed to that decline. One is a small impact, and that's birth rates. Birth rates have been declining since COVID, and it's going to take us several years to pick back up. But the greatest impact has been the state's voucher program that gives families who choose to participate approximately $8,000 to homeschool or send their child to a private school.
Let's drill down a little bit on this voucher issue for private schools. You've talked about your support for school choice.
I have.
But I wonder whether you can have school choice at the same time as having thriving public schools. Does that cause a problem in public education?
So I am a very strong supporter of school choice. Parents are their child's first teacher. I personally had 3 children, all very different, and I believe that they have the right to be able to evaluate what supports and resources are available for their children to be educated. What I have a problem with is not properly funding those choice options, and I believe the state could do that if they chose to do so. What's happened is that they have said that they have, taken some of those dollars and put it back in through the base student allocation. But when you take a look at the amount of money, the increase, which is approximately, I think, $45, that doesn't begin to cover the losses that we are experiencing because of the choice program. Another benefit of choice is that it makes us, all of us, better because we're able to see where students are thriving, what parents want for their child's education. And so that idea of competition, that idea of learning from one another, what is producing the best education is another benefit of choice. But when we're handcuffed because we don't have the dollars to be able to provide the necessary resources and supports, then I think that's not an equitable system.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that state funding then. That enrollment drop that we discussed could result in, I think it's close to a $27 million reduction.
Yeah, almost $28 million. Yes.
Almost $28 million for OCPS. I wonder how you address that shortfall in the near, medium and long term. I mean, how much of your budget is going to need to be trimmed as a result of that?
It was painful. We first of all looked at the district divisions and asked them to implement a 2% cut for this upcoming school year. Our district has been very data-driven over the last several years, and that includes looking at academic returns of investment. And so we looked at all of our programs, identified how much the cost of those programs were to our district, and then we looked at our return on investment. What were the outcomes that we were receiving?
How do you judge that in education? By grades?
There's various metrics that we use depending on the service. So for example, if we were looking at tutoring services, we would take a look at participation. We would take a look at some formative data. We would look at our summative data and then determine whether those investments yielded positive results. And from that list, then we were able to identify those areas that were not giving us the greatest return on investment.
What kind of areas?
So we have some programs that have been eliminated, some support services for our students. In some cases, there may have been positions that were unfilled that we did not renew. And we were able to come to what we believe is a balanced budget.
What does that mean for teachers, particularly when it comes to enrollment? Because presumably fewer students, you need fewer
Yes.
teachers. That's got to be difficult, right? I mean, what are you looking at in terms of the number of teachers that you have?
Yes, we went through that process in the spring when our schools received their budgets. They were adjusted for the enrollment, and so in many of our schools, you saw fewer personnel that were needed because the students are not projected to be there. And so we went through our process of eliminating those positions. We did have vacancies after that. Some of the personnel that were cut were temporary certificates or people that were not here for the entire year, and so automatically by contract they're cut. And so we were able to bring some of them back to fill those positions, but it wasn't a net win. So we did have to have schools cut teachers because the students are not projected to be there.
And you're able to maintain an acceptable class size, I
Yes,
guess,
we
because
did
there's
not.
fewer
Right, we
students.
did not touch class size, although there are districts across the state that's an area that they have used to try and balance their budgets because of the declining enrollment. At this point, we have not. We are trying to maintain those class sizes where the state has asked us to.
You've also paused construction of new schools.
New construction, yes.
That seems unusual given that a region is fast growing. We always talk about fast growing regions as needing doctors and transport and schools. You've actually paused that. Is that a long-term strategy? Do you think you're going to be able to hold off on new school construction for the foreseeable future?
So every year we evaluate the list of schools in our 10-year plan, and we look at the numbers, we see if the growth that was projected is still there, and we adjust. That's not an unusual process. What is unusual is the number of schools that have been pushed back 2 or 3 years because the growth has not materialized. And so we expect that within the course of 2 to 3 years, those that were pushed back are going to be at the numbers needed for the new construction. And our projections do show that over the next 5 to 7 years, our enrollment is going to be back to where we expected it to be, that declining enrollment, and that the birth rates are going to be a thing of the past.
But you're still going to need to do some work here in terms of promoting the value of public schools. Clearly, it's a marketplace at this point, right? I mean, parents put their money or put their faith in wherever they're sending their kids. And at the moment, a lot of them, obviously thanks to support from the state, are sending their children to private schools or exploring other options. What do you do as a public educator when it comes to trying to attract people to public education, to your school system?
So first I want to make sure that I'm clear the vast majority of parents are still choosing public schools. I believe the percentage that are choosing the voucher program is in the single digit
It's a growing
percentage.
number though, isn't it?
It absolutely has grown over the last several years. But for us, I still believe that if you do your research, we are the best educational system for your child. It puts us in a position that we haven't been in, at least during my 30 plus years of career in education, where we do have to look at marketing. We have to take a look at what we're offering. We have to take a look at how we are telling our story. Are our families telling our stories? And what are our children, our students saying about their experiences? And then responding to their needs. So if there are specialized programs that parents want more of, we need to be able to be flexible and be able to provide that. What's been interesting is that some of the responses from some parents, they really want a basic education. And when I probe that, they're not as interested in technology. They want their child to be able to read and write fluently. They want them to have a positive experience at school, to learn how to get along, to problem solve. And so if one is not listen or asking and listening, one would make the wrong assumptions. And so for us, it's a matter of expanding magnet programs, expanding choice programs for our families, and ensuring that the experiences they are getting in our schools are positive ones and that we're sharing that.
What happens if the Department of Education is eliminated on the federal level, or at least drastically cut? The US Supreme Court has given the administration the green light to move ahead with a lot of its plans on education. What does that mean for a local school district here in Florida?
That's a great question. I don't know what that's going to mean for us. I know that currently there is a great deal of angst because we depend on the Department of Education to give guidance to us. We're a very large country, diverse, and while I will acknowledge that there were probably inefficiencies, there were wasted dollars at that level, what we are doing now is creating much more anxiety, and I don't believe it's going to result in better outcomes or more efficiencies.
Some better news. Orange County Public Schools and many others around the state got an A grade again from the state. There has been some pushback on the accuracy of these, of how the grades are issued. There's some talk of grade inflation. Schools continue to improve across Florida according to the state. What do you think about the accuracy of these assessments?
And I've read some of the recent articles that identify some of that skepticism. When I look at our grading criteria, I believe that it accounts for a number of variables that include proficiency and include growth. I mean, we have a very diverse population. I love to say that we serve this beautiful tapestry of children that come from various backgrounds. Some of them don't speak English or are just learning the language. And so the expectations and what that child may be able to produce as far as proficiency in their second or third year is very different than someone that has lived here and is a native speaker. But what you can measure is their improvements. I do believe that you have to look at both. We're an A district. We have seen increases in almost every one of the categories thanks to the incredible work of our teachers and our support staff, our students and our families. But I do think it is a reflection of the work that's taking place because we have seen not only growth, but we've also seen increases in proficiency. I also want to say that the new assessment system that the state of Florida put into place has helped us tremendously to be able to identify much sooner if a child is struggling so that we can then intervene and provide the necessary supports so that the child can do better. And I think there isn't enough conversation around what the impact of the new assessment has had on the scores, because now you have a snapshot at the beginning of the year, you have a snapshot in the middle of the year, parents have access to that, and so they too can work in partnership with us to help their child overcome some of those deficit areas or the areas that they have not yet mastered.
It's interesting because the learning gains part of this is one of the things that critics point to as being harder to prove than just the raw data, whether kids ace their tests or not. And that should be how school districts are judged, presumably, and it sounds like you push back on that.
I do, because it's a very complex system. And when you are looking at how the child is doing, growth is part of it. We're not all starting out at the same page, and they're not giving more weight to one area than another. And so the component of proficiency in ELA, mathematics, science at the upper grades, you have civics and social studies, as well as some of the other biologies. the learning gains only occur in the areas of ELA and mathematics. You also have the graduation component, and you also have the acceleration component. For the high school has both of those, and then middle school also has acceleration. Is it a perfect system? No, I think it would be very difficult to come up with a system that you have 100% agreement. But I do believe that the system that we have in place is transparent. It allows parents to know all along the year how their child is doing. Could there be other things we look at? Could you look at attendance? Absolutely. Could you look at community service and see if how many of our students are participating in community service? Yes, you could. Would it be a more realistic picture? I don't know. Grades are very subjective. If you go back even to when I was in school, you could have a teacher across the hallway with a totally different grading scale, even though they were teaching the same exact content. That happens now as well. So an A in your class may not be an A in my class, even though we're covering the same content. So I look at the trajectory of our data. Are we making improvements? I look at the areas that are below the state average. I look at the areas that are below our district average, see if there's necessary supports that are not in place. Do we need more training? And I believe that's why you have seen us improve consistently over the last few years.
But there seems to be a discrepancy between federal data on how Florida schools perform. I mean, the Department of Education in February released data showing that Florida middle schoolers' math and reading scores continue to decline in the state. I wonder why the Department of Education on the federal level sees something different going on, or do they? Are they just measuring this differently, as you talked about?
You're referring to the NAEP test, and that is a very different test. I hear the arguments. How can a school be rated A and half of their children are not reading on grade level?
It's a different test, as you say, but it does confuse parents.
Well, but
right,
even
when they
now,
look at
on our FAST assessment, you can see where there are some schools that are rated an A at let's say at the high school level, and maybe the proficiency is at 50% or 55%, and people question that. I think that is a question that every school and school district needs to identify. So if you're an A school, but we look at our subgroups. Okay, so how are our second language learners doing? How are our children who are economically disadvantaged doing? How are the boys doing versus the girls? And you look for the gaps and see who needs more supports. And so a number doesn't always give you all of the information, and yet we believe that those numbers should, but they never have. We've heard parents, we've heard teachers talk about grade inflation, or parents who will say, this teacher counts homework for 20%, this teacher does not. So the grades are subjective. I still stand by the assessment system that the state of Florida has in place. I think it's the best one that has been around since I have been an educator in the state of Florida, because it keeps parents informed. It really builds that partnership that we are here to educate your child together, and we're able to monitor if that child is making progress, and if not, we can intervene much sooner than we would with previous assessments.
There's been a laser focus on education, particularly in Florida. There's often a focus on education in Florida, but in recent years, it's really been at the center of a lot of the political discourse. School districts like yours have been dragged into a lot of these culture war debates that we've seen in Tallahassee. And I wonder what you make of the effect that has, both on administrators and teachers on a practical level, how you go about doing your job. Have your practices had to change significantly in recent years, particularly since COVID?
I would have to say yes. And I don't think that it's all bad, right? I think that some of the changes that have come about were necessary, but I find myself struggling to ensure that our teachers can come in and teach our children without having that added weight that the political climate has had. We are very clear on the standards that need to be taught. We have a concerted effort to ensure that all new policies, regulations, that laws that come down that are followed, that we put in place systems that clearly communicate what we can and what we can't do. But the emotion that is tied to some of the changes that have taken place in education create an environment for our teachers and our children that I believe competes with having that safe environment where you learn. And it's not something that when I was appointed superintendent, if you asked me that was something I'm going to have to deal with, I would have said, yes, that's on my radar. I know I've got to deal with it. I knew I would have to deal with it as part of my job. I knew it would be something that as a board we would have to work on. But as I'm having conversations with teachers and their perceptions of the impact the laws have had on them and their practice, and not feeling safe that someone could just wrongly accuse them, and then they have to go through that ordeal of being investigated, providing, testimony, is one that was not there. And I think that it has created a deterrence. You can see that colleges of education are closing around the country. People are not going into education. And it used to be that we would say it's because of the money. And I believe we do not pay our educators enough. But that's not the reason now they're leaving. And that is so sad to me, because it is the most rewarding profession. You impact not just that one child, you impact generations.
Yep.
And the fact that we now have politics that has become a reason why people are not going into that field is very sad.
Supporters would say, that it's about parental rights. Parental rights is, we hear a lot about in
Yes.
Florida, and that goes to the ability of parents to challenge things that happen in the classrooms, whether it's pronoun use or various books or reading materials, LGBTQ issues, that kind of thing. Is it good that parents have the ability to have a greater say in their children's education? Is that what's going on here? Is it just democratization of education?
So parents absolutely should have and do have a voice in education. I think what has happened is that things are not always black and white. And what your beliefs are may not be mine. And that has created a tension that is deterring dialogue. And the fear aspect of it has brought us to a place where we're not communicating, we're not trying to understand where the other person is coming from. And I think that fear factor is putting people in a position where they believe, you don't want to hear what I have to say about this, you don't understand, and this is how we're going to do it. If your beliefs align with what the rules and regulations are, things are great. But if they don't align, how do you work through that conflict, and how do you create a school where you value everyone, regardless of what they look like, and understand that we all have something that we can contribute? And I am not going to impose my beliefs on you, and you're not going to impose your beliefs on me. We're going to be able to work together regardless of that. And I think that's what's happened is it's become such an issue that we are negating the conversation. Where before, not in all cases, because I know why we're here, But in many cases, people, that wasn't even on their radar. It didn't matter if you were part of the LGBT community or not. We worked together, we were in the same classroom, and they may not even know that that was happening. And I understand parents were upset because things were happening with their child and they weren't aware of it.
And we saw that play out here in this very room.
Yes. And I think as a parent, you have the right to know. I believe that wholeheartedly. The rub comes when the perception that the child is not going to be accepted, or that the child's parent is going to, maybe, and I'm just using the topic of LGBTQ. Teachers have acted in a way where they thought they were protecting the child. And that may or may not have been the case, but that was their belief. And so instead of us being able to have a conversation about why they acted in the way they did, it's automatically assumed it was wrong. And so I think it's important for the teachers to be able to understand how that parent feels. That's my child. How is it that you did not tell me? Did you just make the assumption that I wouldn't accept my child? And then for the parent to understand, I didn't mean any harm from this. Your child genuinely was afraid that they were not going to be accepted. And so I was trying to provide the support necessary. But we're not in that place anymore. And so we follow the law. I try to model diplomacy. I try to model trying to get along and listen to others. It doesn't mean I always agree, but I will respect you, and I will give you the time to try and explain to me your stance.
I want to finish by looking ahead at the school year that starts in just a few days here in Central Florida. There is a new law in schools around the state that will prevent the use of cell phones and wireless devices K through 8. You guys have been doing something similar to this for a while. Presumably this is a law that you welcome. What benefits have you seen?
Right. We have seen tremendous benefits from limiting the use of cell phones during the school day. We actually implemented, as part of our code of conduct 2 years ago, that cell phones were not allowed bell to bell. And we did that based on feedback from the town halls I did my first year as superintendent. We heard from students, from parents, from teachers about disruptions in the classrooms, the impact that cell phones were having, and so we implemented the policy. Parents had one big concern, actually two. They wanted to make sure that they could reach their child if they needed to, and if there was an active assailant on campus, how could they ensure their child was safe? And so we did two things. Each school has a process by which if a child needs to communicate with their parent, they're able to do so. And if the parent reaches out to the school messages they're able to talk to their child. And then the second concern we addressed in a more informal fashion, that if there is an active assailant or they're in a position where they can't move, they're in a lockdown mode, if they have their cell phones, they can access them and they can text. We explain to parents, you don't really want your child talking on the phone because any noise could alert, if there is an intruder, that there's someone in that room. And so it has worked. We have seen a decline in some of our discipline offenses that include disruptions, fighting, both at the elementary and at the high school level. Teachers are saying that they have much fewer interruptions in the classroom. Students are saying that they are able, to pay attention because they don't have those disruptions. Schools also implemented activities during lunchtime because that's really when we heard from kids they missed it the most. And so I think that has all helped the implementation to go smoother than it might have.
We've talked a lot today about the need to communicate with parents, and I wonder how you are planning on doing that going forward, in terms of how do you keep parents in touch with what you're doing, all aspects of their children's education? Do you have a plan for that?
We do, and I can tell you that is vital to our work, to be able to communicate not just information to them, but hear back from them. And so we have various opportunities for parents to give us feedback. I personally hold town halls every year with parents in each of the board member districts. We do surveys. Our schools have different events that engage the families. But this year, one of the things I'm very excited about is we're implementing really 2 new tools to help parents maneuver through our website and gather information or gain answers to their questions, and it's called Let's Talk. It is aimed at using AI to help parents get information quickly that may already be on our website, and if it's not, it directs them to the right person. And then the second tool, which is going to have an impact across our entire district, is ParentsWare. It's a new communication platform that we are using. It consolidates all of our tools onto one platform. It officially launched a few weeks ago, and we are very, very excited. The capability for the schools to send out information, teachers to be able to communicate with students and their families individually as well as a whole. All of our websites are now through that system. If you had not been on our website before, or if you had, you're going to see some major differences in what they see. And so we are very excited. We will also ask for feedback from our parents to see how the rollout is going, if there's things that they would like to see more of, less of, and
Sort of in beta.
Well, yeah, we've been working on this for about a year, a little bit over a year. But whenever we do roll something out, we always want to be able to, not just our feedback, but the feedback of the people that are using it. Our schools will be key to that, because we want to make communication as easy as possible for them. And this new platform helps streamline so much. It also gives them an easier way to be able to communicate. We can push things out from the district to them easier, quicker. And so I'm very excited about the new platform.
You've got a lot on your shoulders. Are you optimistic for the future with all these changes coming down the pipe on the state and federal level? As an educator, how do you look at the landscape now? Do you see a rosy future for education, public education in particular?
I see an opportunity. And I've shared this on a couple of occasions with people who have asked me something similar. So I think we missed the boat in COVID. I think COVID was an opportunity for public school to do things differently, to rethink how we use time, space, and resources. And we started, and then we reverted right back to where we were before. And you think about all the other industries, professions, they're not the same. They have evolved, they've changed. But I would wager that if you go into any of our schools and you sit in a classroom, you might see computers that weren't in place when you were in school. But pretty much, it looks the same. And so I'm hopeful that all of this that we are going through right now is going to spur the innovation that really transforms public education, that genuinely looks at parents being true partners, that allows for us to learn from one another what is working, that allows us to tap into industry so our children have more opportunities to have real life learning and see how you use algebra, or you have an interest in this field. Let's have you talk to an individual who's actually doing this right now. And so I am hopeful. I'm also very cognizant that I'm in a unique position. I have an incredible board. I have a community that supports public education. They believe the power in educating our children. And even when we have the chaos that we are facing right now, they believe in us. They believe that during the time children are with us, they're getting an excellent education, and that it is going to transform them, and it's going to transform our community. And so I am very hopeful. I'm also resilient, so I'm not going to give up when some things get hard. So we'll wait and see, but I'm going to continue to look at this as the glass is half full, and right now we're just feeling a little bit of pain.
Well, Maria Vazquez, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.